name is Adam Hughes. I'm an application engineer with GoEngineer, and today we're featuring the Disco Inferno for Shape Your World. In this video, we'll be highlighting some of the key characteristics in SOLIDWORKS Visualize. Featured in this video, we're going to take a look at the Disco Inferno BattleBot. Now, given all of these vast products, it's great to know that GoEngineer has experts in each one of these to help you on your way. Today, we're going to be looking at SOLIDWORKS Visualize and how you can integrate that in your current workflow. Great, so let's talk about Visualize for a second. There's two different kinds of packages for SOLIDWORKS Visualize, Standard and Professional. The great news is that if you have SOLIDWORKS Pro or Premium, you can activate your Visualize Standard license at any time. You can call our technical support if you need any help. Visualize Standard is great for those 2D pictures, but rather just creating pictures, generating high quality images that we can use on our website, for marketing, or any brochures. Visualize Professional has several productivity tools, as well as the addition of all the different types of animations you can create, including advanced lighting and configurations. So what is SOLIDWORKS Visualize? It's the camera-free CAD documents. Sure, CAD documents look okay on their own, but if you really want to produce high-quality images to capture the eye of consumers, or maybe generate art for your packaging, and awesome images for your website, Visualize is your tool. Here in Visualize, we can create several different types of renders. Ultra 4K or Ultra 5K high-definition images, videos that include sunsetties, turntables, and animations, VR so that your customers can do a 360 spin of your product before they decide to purchase, and panoramic views to steal your customers' attention and focus it on your product. Great! So now that we've highlighted some of the basics, let's jump right into SOLIDWORKS Visualize. Before we load up Visualize, let's take a look at some of the differences inside of SOLIDWORKS. What you'll notice is if you have Visualize installed, you can go under Add-ins and turn on the Visualize add-in. Now browsing to your Visualize tab, you can see that we have our 4 Visualize buttons: Export Simple, Export Advanced, an update if anything changes, and an advanced save to push those changes into Visualize. Here I already have a simple export completed, so let's browse into that. Before we dive into actually painting this model, let's take a look at the UI briefly. Now, one mental note is that this is Visualize Professional, so one of the things you won't have if you're running Visualize Standard is this base configuration area. Another thing you won't have access to is the timeline view at the bottom. Seeing how videos aren't enabled in Standard, this won't be of any use. Lastly, if we go to View and turn on Queue, the queue functionality is only a part of Visualize Professional as well. At the top here, we can see some of our render selections. Here, if I mouse to preview mode, this is a lighter graphical load, and therefore doesn't require as much computation, so it's really easy to rotate and move the model. This is my preferred method for viewing animations or any sort of video that I'm creating inside of Visualize. The next option is Fast. The Fast render is meant to be a quick render where we just get a good idea about what the model is going to look like. It's slightly more graphically demanding, and so they give us these 3 options: steady, blended, and downscaled. You can try each of these to see which one fits best with your graphics card. Lastly, let's take a look at Accurate. Accurate is the highest rendering capability for the UI, running the light traces, and ultimately getting us the most accurate image without rendering. This is the most graphically demanding. Let's go ahead and switch back to Fast so I can show you some more things. Our Select tool, we can select based off model, appearance, part, and group. Also, our Manipulation tool, we can choose to move things, scale them, or rotate them. Lastly, our Render icon. We can also find this under Tools and Render. Selecting what you want to render, which cameras, which configurations, and what type of render you like, whether it be an image, or an animation, or a turntable. And Professional can be easily sent to a queue and change priority so that you can select to render what jobs you want in what order, and also at what time. Simply starting the queue when you leave for lunch, or maybe when you leave for work, can save you a bunch of time in the long run. Next up, there are two interfaces to SOLIDWORKS Visualize: the Advanced mode, which we're in right now, and the Simple UI. By hitting the spacebar, you can toggle between each. I find myself working in the Advanced mode more often because I tend to tweak some of the settings. So decide which one's best for you and run with it. So lastly, let's talk about some of the options in Visualize. First off, let's talk about render devices. SOLIDWORKS Visualize is designed to run with NVIDIA Quadro, CUDA, and eye trace enabled cards. For example, a Quadro K4000 or 3100M or M6000 for that matter. The better the graphics card, the faster your render results will populate. Here on this computer, I'm running a Quadro 3100M, and I find that my resolution of 960 by 540 for my UI and doesn't slow down any of my processes and doesn't slow down my workflow. If you do have a CUDA-enabled Quadro card and you're on CPU mode, be sure to check for the latest driver for SOLIDWORKS Visualize. Now, when selecting GPU versus hybrid, this is really dependent on your graphics card. So with automatic turned on, hybrid's pre-selected. And that's just because my Quadro card is kind of a middle-of-the-road graphics card. And so it's going to use both the RAM on my motherboard and the RAM on the graphics card to render my images. Now on a higher end card or a faster GPU, that will actually slow you down. So if you're running anything past a 4000, K4000, then be sure to switch your render device to GPU only. You should see performance boost from that. Under User Interface, new to SOLIDWORKS Visualize 2017, we have a navigation mode for SOLIDWORKS CAD users. So all those hotkeys and mouse manipulations you're used to inside of SOLIDWORKS are now carried over into Visualize. Huge plus. Okay, now that we're done looking at the UI, let's go ahead and make some changes to this model. We'll start by just cleaning up the background. As you can see here, Visualize has pulled in the 3-point faded backdrop from SOLIDWORKS. Although that looks good in SOLIDWORKS, it's probably not the best option here in Visualize, so we'll delete some of these. Next, let's browse to our appearances and take a look at some options for changing our environment. For this particular model, I really like Docklands Bridge. It has this cool backdrop and makes it look like my BattleBot is actually in an arena ready to battle. Let's go back to our scenes and just clean up this Chrome Studio, get that out of the way. Now let's go ahead and change some of our appearances on our model. First, we'll start off with the aluminums, or metals rather. Let's start with brushed aluminum on the case, gunmetal on the spinning disc, and why not gunmetal for the wheels too, the rims. We'll go ahead and anodize the inside of the wheels. Put some heat-treated metal on the impact components, and rubber for the wheels. Visualize makes painting our SOLIDWORKS models extremely easily. What you'll notice is that it's grouped a lot of things together. For instance, all the wheels, hardware, or any other component that has similar appearances inside of SOLIDWORKS. So very quickly and easily, I can create a beautiful image of our CAD model. Next, let's go ahead and detail this spinning disc a little better. Let's activate my part select mode, select the disc, and what we're going to do is choose to extract a portion of the disc out so that we can use that to apply a texture and ultimately the disco part of the disco disc. After clicking split and selecting the face, we can see that it's going to grab the top face of this so we can apply a texture to it. Run the execute split and close. What we'll see is In our tree, we have a new part that just represents the top part of that disk. Great. Now let's go ahead and find our 24 karat gold. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint this gold, but I know ahead of time that I'm going to change the texture and ultimately create a new disco gold for this material. So after applying it, let's go find it in our appearances and locate gold. Here we can bump up the roughness a little bit, but really my goal here is to make that disco gold color and then also apply a texture that kind of represents that. Here we'll grab this gold PNG file that kind of has the texture that I'm looking for and apply it to the gold material. We'll change the tile to 10 and then maybe the bump strength to 10 as well. Now what you can see is when we zoom in, we have the reflective plates from a disco ball on this flat disk. What's also really cool too is that once we've already made this material, we can choose to save it so that we can reuse it later in our appearance library. Next, let's try to add a decal. Let's add the Disco Inferno decal to the side of our BattleBot. Simply drag it onto this face, and the decal will kind of stick on. Now we notice that it's a little big. So let's go ahead and scale this down just a little bit. That looks better. Let's rotate this and kind of move it into position. Awesome. Now it's official. It is the Disco Inferno. While we're here and we've created this awesome logo, let's try a couple camera tricks. So the one thing I want to try here is depth of field. And I'm kind of going to get this just right. And I'm going to enable depth of field, grab my focal point, and adjust my f-stop so that I can fade in the logo and fade out everything else. So what you can see is the logo is in full resolution, and then out here towards the border, we're kind of getting fuzzy, which really captures the attention of the name of the BattleBot. So if I make a couple more adjustments and let this render for a second, you can see how easy it is to create these ultra realistic images of our CAD documents with very little work. We'll let this get to about 100 passes or so. And now you can really see the fading and then the crisp detail towards the logo. Another really great thing, I want to look at the color of these stoppers. I noticed they're this color 20 grayish color. Well, that was just brought in from SOLIDWORKS. But we can fix this. We can actually rename it a Pantone color if we wanted. Maybe followed by the actual Pantone digit, so if we ever want to look this up again, we totally could. But here, I'm going to use this little color picker to select a color off of a Pantone picture. So with my Pantones in place and activating the color, I can grab the color picker and browse over various colors to actually select the proper Pantone for each one of these parts. Next up, let's go ahead and reorient our model. Make sure we have it captured the way we want it to. We will turn off our f-stop, depth of field, and start using our animation tool to show some of the inside components of this very intricate BattleBot. So let's go ahead and select the components that we want to hide. Control selecting will allow you to select multiple objects, and we can right click and create a key. We can move our timeline over, and then tell those components to change opacity given time. Next, we'll copy those opacity keys and give us a little time break. We'll move these to the start, and then duplicate these as well, and move those to the end. This way we have a nice transition of our components fading in and fading out. Changing our render selection to preview allows us to view these changes very easily, independent of any graphics cards. Pressing play now, we can see the components start to fade in transparency and then fade back. Awesome. Let's try another thing. Let's add a cut plane. Here in the right-hand menu, we can select New Cutting Plane. We can assign a keyframe to it, and then move this keyframe in and out so that we can show dynamically show the internal guts of our BattleBot. Now playing this all back together, we can see our components start to go transparent. Then the cutting plane cuts through the model, comes back, and our transparency comes back to full opacity. If you wanted to put a pause for the cutting plane, what we could do, move this to the left a little bit, duplicate the key, and then spread out that 0 time a little bit longer. Let's take a look at that. There we go. Perfect. This can now be easily rendered as an animation and put up on your website. And what's really great about Visualize is that we might have a couple more ideas about what this product may look like, or should look like for that matter, and we could take advantage of those with our configuration tool. Let's create a new configuration, call it Silver, and begin to make some changes. Now here in my Appearance tab, we can see all the appearances that are used on the model. Sometimes this can get a little clustered. So what we can do is right-click and say Unify All Appearances. Also, delete any appearances and textures that are no longer in use. There, we've shortened that up a little bit now. So in our silver configuration, let's apply a silver material to the top portion of our spinning disc. Let's go find silver now in our Appearance tab, and we're going to rename this Silver Disco. Next, let's load a texture, and this time we'll look for the Silver Disco texture. We'll change its tile from 1 to 10, and the bump strength from 1 to 10. And now we have a new type of disco wheel. We can toggle back to our original configuration at any time, and even publish these all at the same time too. Lastly, let's look at some of our render options. Under Tools, we can select Render, and we can easily take a snapshot. If we let this image on our screen render long enough, it'll actually look pretty good. And the snapshot tool is a great way to quickly capture images without having to wait for renders. Next up, we have our render output. So we select maybe all cameras or all configurations, maybe VR. Here we select the orbits, the images per orbit, the start angle and ending angle. And that's how we get that spherical wraparound of images so that our customers can spin our model and take a look at it even before they purchase it, or maybe even before it's produced. Followed by your resolution, and then whether you want to send it to the queue or start the render right away. Here we have our animation render, our turntable render, and our sun study render. Another handy tool is once you find all the settings that you like in your rendering tools, your resolution, size, default pixels per inch, your quality and passes, what you can do is you can save this as a default render profile so that you can use this again in the future without having to make all those changes. Great, we're almost complete with this file, and actually it looks pretty darn good right now. With some rendering and maybe some minor tweaks here and there, we'll have a finished product. Now that we've captured all the critical detail in this model, we're ready to render. And here I've created a couple and linked them to our SOLIDWORKS file so that we can take a look. Each one of those renders took less than 3 minutes. Now let's take a look at the advanced export here in SOLIDWORKS Visualize. This is a really handy tool, and in fact, with a little bit of planning, you can save yourself a bunch of time. So for this model, I went ahead and jumped into the Make controller. It's a new tool back in 2015. I happen to really like it. Let's take a look. The Make controller allows me to vary mates given time to create an animation. And I'll show you why this is important in just a second. But let's take a look at this animation real quick. The lid opens, the wheel begins to spool up, and it moves faster and faster until it's ready to hit another BattleBot. Awesome. The Make controller works really well. But what we can do is we can reuse that information inside of a animation, a SOLIDWORKS animation. We can click on the wizard icon and select, hey, grab me that animation from our Make controller and do all the work for me. Fantastic. So that's essentially what I've done here. We can quickly play this. It kind of shows the unloading and loading, which is fantastic. But really what I want to do is I want to take this animation and I want to import it into Visualize, but I won't have to do any of the work. Well, the great news is that's exactly how it works. Select Export Advanced and select the motion study you want to bring in. SOLIDWORKS will run through its calculation and begin to map those keys from SOLIDWORKS to Visualize. Next, Visualize will load up, and all that work's completed. Let's take a look. We'll change our render selection to preview so we can actually watch the animation. And let's hit play. Notice that all our keys and all the components that are moving have been added in, and we're ready to watch the animation. Great. Another really neat feature with the Export Advanced is that SOLIDWORKS and Visualize communicate like you'd expect any SOLIDWORKS product. If you change a drawing, it updates the part. If you change the part, it updates the drawing. Same thing here with SOLIDWORKS and SOLIDWORKS Visualize. If I modify this configuration from O1 to cosmetic, we can see the change on the disk. It adds reflectors in. But does this change propagate to Visualize? Absolutely. Simply hit the update button, and Visualize will prompt you with a window that says, hey, the original source data has been modified. Do you want to re-import? Selecting yes, all those changes, even an advanced animation, will pass through into Visualize, and you're ready to keep working on your project. This is great for the group of people who maybe aren't part of the design but are part of marketing. So you can imagine that the engineering team can get started on the design work, all the while the marketing team can get started on creating renders. Now, as the engineering team updates the document, then the marketing team can pull that information in and use it without having to re-import or recolor the model. Huge time saver. And the great news is, it always works. Let's try this one more time though. Here I have a slightly more complex animation. Jumping back, we're going to take a look at our second motion study. Now you can see that this is pretty intricate. There's a lot of stuff going on here. Anybody know what this is? It's an exploded view, right? So we can take this series of explode operations. Now we can take this and animate it and collapse it inside of SOLIDWORKS. But wouldn't it be great to actually play this inside of Visualize? So let's take a look at this more advanced animation and see how that propagates into Visualize too. Here, I'll just play this, and we'll play it 5 times speed. Now, keep in mind, this is nothing more than an exploded view inside of SOLIDWORKS. And the other great thing about the animation wizard is that we can also capture this right here in our animation tool without having to do any extra work. So think about any time you've ever created an explode animation and wanted to create an ultra high resolution video off of it, you can do it now. This video is about a minute and 45 seconds long. Now let's transpose that into SOLIDWORKS Visualize. Simply hit Export Advanced, select the motion study 2 in this case, and click Accept. Now this does take a second because it is a minute and 45-second file. So let's just go ahead and take a look at the already imported file inside of Visualize. What's even really cool about this is that I haven't changed that configuration for the disk back yet. Remember, I changed the configuration from 001 to cosmetic? Here you can see that window working again. It's recognized that, hey, there's been a change, and if you would like to, you can re-import now. Here, if we click yes, we'd see the change, but for the sake of just showing this part of the translation, we'll just select no. Now you can see that our minute and 45 video has been created with all the varying geometry that needs to be moved, and all the keys already created. You could imagine doing this in Visualize would take a really long time, but leveraging all the information from SOLIDWORKS and reading it into Visualize makes our life a whole lot easier. Let's go ahead and quickly play this just so we can get an idea about what it looks like. One of the things I'd like to highlight with Visualize Pro is that we do have the capability to create lights. So if you go to Project and then select Scene and select Light, we'll get our new lights that we can create. Each light is totally editable. We can specify whether it's a point light, a spotlight, or a directional light, the color, and then the intensity. So that's a real handy tool when we're really getting particular on how everything looks. Well, I hope you enjoyed some of this great exciting stuff in SOLIDWORKS Visualize. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the comments below. This is Adam Hughes with GoEngineer. Thanks for watching.